Hey everyone, welcome to another installment of Fearless Fridays on Facebook Live. So for those of you who are joining me live or joining me at a later date, thank you for joining at whatever time that may be. So we are this week talking about how to kind of integrate some of your STEM learning into a classroom environment. So this week's live is kind of focused to those of you who are classroom teachers or kind of school board educators, principals, educators who we would typically kind of consider to be in traditional settings. So if any of you are watching live and at any point you notice that it's a little bit difficult to hear me, just let me know. All of the kids are actually upstairs right now doing their final STEM challenge of the day. But as I'm sure many of us know with campers, that when excited campers come in, it can be a little bit hard to hear what else is going on in the room. So just let me know if there's any trouble hearing me at any point during the live. So basically what I wanted to do is just come on, this might be a shorter session, and share some of our kind of ideas and some of what we value to be the lowest struggle and kind of easiest to implement activities if you are looking to do STEM learning or STEM education in your classroom. I'm going to kind of target more of the sort of elementary K-8 discussion. But of course, it's things that you could do in high school as well. And just kind of share some ideas and talk about how you can start to implement that because the school year is approaching fast. So number one thing to remember if you are looking to integrate STEM learning or start to kind of do STEM learning in your classroom is that it's not as scary as it sounds. A lot of people when they, especially when they're a teacher and you're an educator, you know, your tower is constantly being piled up with more and more things that you are kind of expected or required to cover on a day-to-day basis. For those of you who are not educators, you may or may not know that there's about like 2,000 individual curriculum, like specific expectations that need to be covered within a year. So that's a lot. And it can feel like as STEM and as kind of new trends in education come up, sometimes it can feel like you have more added to your plate and not enough time to do it. The good news is that STEM is really just the way that the world works. So it's not like an additional sort of curriculum item or something extra that you have to add onto your plate, but really what it is it's a new way to kind of look at things that we're already teaching and things that we're already doing in the classroom and just kind of teach it in a different sort of way. So similar to kind of how math education is going right now, where you're still teaching the same principles, it's just instead of doing drill sheets, now you're doing more hands-on activities. STEM learning is very much the same sort of way. So you're still teaching the same principles, you're still teaching the same expectations. You know, your units are still potentially going to look very similar to like how they've always looked. You're just kind of varying up some of the activities and some of the ways in which you deliver content. One, so that it's fresh and new and engaging for the kids, but also in a way that kind of just fits with their learning style. Because as I'm sure many of us have realized nowadays, kids learn differently. You know, I watch kids every day here at STEM Minds, and the way that they absorb information and the ideas that they come up with is not only inspiring, but, you know, it kind of humbles me that when I was their age, I didn't have ideas like that, or, you know, didn't think about things in the same sort of way. So what that means in terms of education and educators is that, you know, we also need to kind of take that into consideration and think about how exactly are we going to now structure our learning and structure these experiences in a way that is very meaningful for the students in our class. So great thing about STEM learning as well is that it is beautiful for integration. Again, it's not that extra sort of thing that you have to add on. And I think that a lot of times when we think about STEM, because it's science, technology, engineering, and math, sometimes we get stuck that, you know, the STEM activities are going to be done in the science period or science block, or the STEM activities are going to be done in the math block. That doesn't have to be the case. The beauty about STEM learning, especially when you start to think about things like video game design, 2D and 3D design, is that you're actually covering multiple areas of the curriculum as you are doing these activities. So if we take 3D printing for an example, you're looking at art, you're looking at design, you're looking at sometimes even language for communication, you're looking at math because it's all about sizing and shapes and things like that. You're looking at science depending on what sort of project or 3D printing kind of topic you are doing. So you're able to actually cover multiple expectations within one sort of activity. And again, if we have, you know, over 2,000 to cover within a year, the more we can bundle together, the better. So what you kind of need to think about is, again, not get stuck in that, you know, I'm doing STEM, but just kind of think differently about how you are having kids engaged with the learning. One of our favorite examples to kind of share at STEM Minds of how we do this is teaching language and looking at especially kind of like writing and storytelling and narrative writing through code. A lot of times when we think about code, I know we've talked about this time and time again, but it bears repeating. We think of it as something that's very, very technical, very, very sort of mathematical. But that's not the case. Code is actually a language itself. And if you go and watch our very, very first Fearless Fridays, we actually talk all about kind of code and how it is really a language. And when you're learning how to code, you're learning another language the same way that you would be learning Spanish or French or anything. And so it lends itself very, very well to cover the language curriculum. So when you're integrating STEM learning, what you're going to start to do, or what we recommend you start to do, is, you know, do something you were going to do anyway, and then just take a little bit of a different twist to it. Most of us teachers will, you know, always when we're kind of assessing writing, we want the kids to write. So whether they, you know, are writing pen and paper, whether they are writing in just sort of actual like typing, maybe now instead of getting them to type out that story, you're actually going to get them to code their story. So one of our projects that we really like to do here at STEM Minds is a code your own adventure. So maybe, you know, instead of having them actually write out their short story, what they're doing now is you're teaching them to code. They're now using those skills to do their, you know, assessment piece, which is that short story writing. But instead of just writing the story by typing it out and kind of handing in their paper good copy, they're actually writing a code adventure that could be interactive or could not be interactive. And so it's just kind of taking that idea and bringing it to a next level. But at the same time, it's teaching them some really crucial skills and some really critical skills that are going to be pretty essential for their future. So the focus, again, is still that sort of language curriculum or that language piece. But what they're doing instead is, instead of kind of specifically doing coding and teaching for the coding for the sake of coding, they're learning a new skill in a meaningful way, but they're also starting to learn how some of those narrative or language concepts can also be applied in other areas of their life, which ultimately I think as educators, that is the goal, because as we know, the world does not work in isolation. So it's not like you're ever going to have a very specifically, this is a math problem and it's only a math problem, or this is a language problem and it's only a language problem. You know, they're starting to actually see in a real sort of hands-on way that this, you know, learning how to code involves language and involves math and involves lots of other stuff. So that kind of comes naturally with them starting to do projects in this way. Another example that we love that you can really easily start to integrate is a green screen. And a lot of times when we do professional development and we do workshops and things like that, you know, teachers will come to us with all these questions about like, well, how would I use this in my classroom? Or, you know, this is a great idea and I'm thinking about doing this, and, you know, where do I start? And the perfect way to start, especially as you get to kind of the junior and intermediate grades, is buy a green screen. So one that's very similar to like right behind me there, or even a green tablecloth, as long as it's the same shade of green that you can get at the dollar store will work wonders. I know many teachers, especially in grade 5, when we're looking at weather, will have their students actually make like weather newscasts or do short videos. You're still doing the videos, just now add that green screen component. So instead of in front of a blank wall, they're now starting to look at the green screen. They're starting to look at you know, how they can use technology and integrate technology in a very meaningful way, while still keeping the activity engaging and still allowing the learning to really take place. And you know, as a teacher or an educator, you're still assessing the same sort of concepts or the same sort of learning that you would have before as well, but you're now just starting to introduce these little sort of bits and pieces of STEM education in a way, again, that's not like piling it all on your plate, but also not on the student's plate either. We also really like to, again, do 3D design. That's a really great one that you can integrate into any sort of unit. So especially when we're doing geometry, 3D printing is all like 3D modeled shapes. And so again, you're looking at math, you're looking at language, you're looking at arts. There's some really great opportunities to kind of integrate that math and arts curriculum when you're doing things like 3D design or even code sometimes. So the more you can kind of do bits and pieces together, the easier it is for you as a teacher, but the more effective it is for your students as well, because they're starting to see those interconnections between what they're learning. And that starts to eliminate some of that, well, why am I learning this? When am I ever going to use this again? Because it starts to look at those real world applicable skills in different sort of ways. So again, the idea when you're trying to add STEM activities in your classroom is just taking little bits and pieces, doing things that you would already sort of plan to do, and you're just, you know, looking at them in a new way. Similar to how maybe you're teaching an art concept, and instead of doing the same project you've always done, you're like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, try and this new sort of art project that I saw on Pinterest or whatever to teach about, you know, the color wheel. Now you're looking at, you know, you're writing code instead of actually drawing it or something like that. So it's actually not as scary as it seems to start to integrate those little bits and pieces there. Another one that we really love that can really apply to any sort of curriculum, but even just especially at the beginning of the year when we're looking to do more of those sort of team building and sort of get to know you activities, we're starting to build our classroom culture a little bit more, our STEM challenges. So the things that we do at the end of camps, the things that we'll do sometimes in our STEAM discovery programs, the types of projects that I'm sure you kind of see on Pinterest as you're looking up, like especially strong and stable structures is full of, you know, little STEM challenges and things like that that you can do. But even if you sort of Google STEM challenge, there's tons and tons and tons of resources available for just little challenges that you can do that start to build more of those sort of social skills or collaborative skills and creative thinking skills and things like that. So you're starting to not only teach them about the actual curriculum, but also all of those other important things that we try and teach and foster in our students every day. So STEM challenges are a really good one to start the year off with. You know, maybe it's something that you do sort of once a week or once a month. You have a day where you're specifically sort of doing a STEM challenge, and that'll foster some of those social pieces, and especially at the beginning of the year, help to build that kind of fun and collaborative classroom environment. And the great thing about starting with sort of build challenges or STEM challenges is that without even knowing it, you're already starting to introduce the kids into some of those STEM learning concepts, and sort of building those foundational skills. So when you're ready to start to introduce coding and you're ready to start to introduce 3D design, it's something that is going to come a little bit more naturally because they're already starting to think about how these skills kind of work in different ways. My last sort of piece of advice to all you other educators and teachers out there is you don't have to feel like you do it all at once. You know, even if you just choose one activity that you want to start doing for STEM learning, that's fine. You don't have to do coding and STEM challenges and 3D design and game design and app development all in one